Well, Donald Trump is set to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska next week in the hopes of ending the war in Ukraine. It will be the pair's first in-person meeting since Trump's return to the White House and Putin's first trip to the US in more than a decade. Trump has said a peace deal would include the swapping of territories.
We're going to get some switched. There'll be some swapping of territories to the betterment of both.
Don't know if both sides are going to see it that way. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky rejected that proposal that involved ceding territory to Russia and said any decision made without him would never work. The White House is now considering inviting him to the meeting in Alaska, but that's yet to be confirmed. Joe, surely any peacemaking effort would have to include Ukraine. That can't just be about appeasing Russia.
Yeah, of course it does. It absolutely has to. And I think Trump knows that now that Melania has told him that maybe the Russians might be the bad guys after all. So I'm sure that will happen. Trump's definitely changed his rhetoric on it. I think when Trump says something, there'll be some swapping. He doesn't really know what he's talking. He's just sort of making it up on the fly and sounding like he's got a plan. The question is, what does swapping those territories look like? How do you have a territory swap when, apart from a tiny little incursion that Ukraine made into Russia, basically all the territory that's changed hands has gone into Russia? So do you say, all right, of all the territories that Russia's invaded, half will go back to Ukraine and half will stay with Russia? Well, that's not really a territory swap, is it? That's just Ukraine giving something that's that. There are arguments that there's a lot of, in all those Eastern European countries, Poland, there's weird divides. I mean, this is what happens when great powers sit down and divide.
Well, there were five countries
up.
World War II sat down and divided it up.
That's right. So there are large areas which are ethnically Russian or Russian-speaking or whatever you want. Crimea is the obvious one. But again, if you give Putin, like we did with Crimea, if you give him some of those eastern states, does he just come back again and again and again and say, well, every time I invade, they give me a little bit more?
It's rewarding. It's like you're rewarding.
It's a bit like rewarding.
I think the Middle East is a guide on how to not handle. So I'm just not convinced that's going to work.
No, I mean, but Holly, he is all about the art of the deal. And Trump's big thing is that he wants to be the person who brings world peace. I mean, could it happen here?
Look, all I can think of when I hear of, Alaska and they're having this meeting is Sarah Palin going to be there saying I can wave to Russia from my back door and now we'll get Vladimir in and we'll try and get a bit of risk happening and get the map out and move a few things around. I mean, you can't do a deal with Putin without Vladimir at the table. That is unbelievable. And, to Darren's point, it's the Middle East, playbook. You can't get Hamas to the table to talk about a peace deal. You've got to be able to get both the players in the room. Otherwise, it's a pointless exercise.
I do think it should happen, though, because I do think this point in time, some form of compromise has to happen. And I know it's not ideal, but the alternative, I think, is worse.
But why should Ukraine have to compromise?
I haven't said who specifically
aggressor.
should. I said there should be compromise on both sides here. And I do think that there is, just like there are so many complexities with the Middle East, there are a lot of complexities to this. There are a lot of ethnic Russians who are in Ukraine who actually have voted and said that they want to be absorbed into Russia. There was a democratic vote on that, like a referendum type thing. There is so much history to this. I don't think it's as black and white as it perhaps looks like geopolitically. But again, I think any end to any war, any end to bloodshed is a good thing. I do agree that obviously Ukraine, Russia need to come to this together, and Trump doesn't need to be the police of the world at this point.
Well, I think Putin thought this was going to be popular within Ukraine. It wasn't, and it won't be. Wise heads have to sort it out.
But most Ukrainian people don't want the war anymore.
Of course they don't want the war,
but they also don't want to be invaded by Russia.
Correct.
So
what's the alternative?
The alternative is that we go back to
do we send our sons and daughters over there?
You've got NATO on one side, Russia on the other, and the pressure just sort of sits there in equilibrium. And then who you allow into NATO becomes important, and there are other things. But it sits in a balance, and Putin upset the balance, and he needs to be put back in his place.